Yes, great. Cool. So thank you all for joining us. This is just a quick webinar to review the suggested test scripts and also the required data format for phase 3. Hopefully you've seen via the newsletters and our social posts, but we have released recently some clarifications to our phase 3 submission requirements. So first we can review the intent of this. So the intent, of course, is to clarify a lot of this for phase 3 for both the judges and for the competitors. So first we want to provide guidance on the type of test scenarios to explore. There was a lot of kind of ambiguity around what specifically we were looking for as far as testing goes. And so we thought that the best way to do that was to just release kind of a recommended way for everybody to test. So next we want to simplify the submission requirements and also the judging. So by being very explicit about what we're expecting, obviously that makes it very easy or much easier for you all to comply with that and clear up any ambiguity, and also to help with judging, to condense everything down to one data format, and also as much as possible simplify the testing requirements. That'll help expedite the judging process and also allow us to make much clearer comparisons between teams. And also would like to clarify that phases 4 and 5 might have different formats. So as we progress through the challenge, just make sure that you are up to date with the newsletter and our office hours and everything like that. And also just a disclaimer, this formatting as well as in phases 4 and 5 are not necessarily endorsed by NIST. These are things that we've come up with for the First Responder Smart Tracking Challenge, and just a way for us to expedite the judging process and clear some of those up. Great, so the rules. So these are the rules that are actually required. We have a recommended testing script, but these are the specific rules that the testing script kind of were built around. So the rules, we want to see 4 or more trials of both of your technology working. So 3 trials must have a translation greater than 15 meters in both X and Y axis. And 1 trial must have an elevation gain or loss of 5 meters or more. We must have live communication with the command center hub with less than 10-second refresh rate and less than 1 second data acquisition rate, which can be wired or wireless, but it does have to be live. It can't be something that you can come back and upload later. There must have sensing with the barrier in place, and they must have video documentation. So it doesn't need to be a wireless video or live streamed anywhere. It can be something you record and upload with your phone with your submission. So to submit for the demonstrations, we are requesting 1 judge video. So the first part of the video, about 5 minutes, should describe your solution, any innovations you've made recently to it, any improvements since phase 2. And the second part of the video, the next 5 minutes, should provide footage of the test scenarios. So the footage of the test scenarios provides 2 things. First, it helps us see how your solution actually works, how it functions. So we want to see kind of how it looks when it's put on, if it's really massive and cumbersome. And also we want to see kind of what it looks like from the command center perspective to see what people on the user end actually see. And lastly, along the same lines with the video, is that it also helps us contextualize the data that we're receiving. So if we receive a file of data with your location, the video of the specific trial that you're running will help us kind of line up what we see in the data to what we see in the video. Next is we expect to see a README files. That's explained in the rules a little bit, and that sort of shows just a lot of upfront information about the demonstrations that you're sharing for us, and then also data files for each test scenario. So that'll be the raw data from your solution that we can later analyze. And that data file, it'll be separate files for each scenario. So it'll be about 4 or 5 files, depending on how many you actually submit. and separate, and they all must follow the required data format. So next, we're going to move on to our recommended test scenarios. So these were built around the requirements and the rules and are strongly recommended, but of course not required for teams to follow. So if you want to kind of skip these and go to more sophisticated tests, you're more than welcome to, but these are sort of the baseline of what we're expecting to see from teams. So I think the recommended testing script file, of course, dives a lot more into the specific each steps, but these visuals do a great job as well. So we have some pauses built in. So starting at the origin, we will want you to walk 7.5 meters forward and pause for 10 seconds. So this will help us kind of look for any drift in your system or any inconsistencies if you're kind of jumping around while you're standing in place. And so that's kind of why we built pauses into each of these scenarios. So the first test is just a large right triangle, walking with pauses. And then I also believe that we ask you to do 3 laps of each trial, of each scenario. So that way we can see, by having you walk over the exact same points multiple times at relatively similar timeframes, we'll be able to compare if when you're in this right or left turn here, if you are actually in the same point in space through your data when you are actually in real life. Next is a large square with 15-meter sides. In this one, we are asking you to place a large obstacle, such as a car or something very similar to that, in the middle of your square, just so we can kind of get a feel for your ability to track through large and large blocks or other obstacles. Thank you, that's the word. Third is a little bit more complicated. So we have 2 separate, so for this one, I suppose I should say we don't have a specific room setup that we're asking. Instead, we are asking a very simple tasks that hopefully you have a room or a building or a setup that you can follow this. So we are asking you to start 5 meters outside of a building, walk into a room inside that building and walk the perimeter of the room, exit that room and enter another room and walk the perimeter of that room, and then exit the building and go back to the origin. And then we're asking for multiple laps of that scenario just to see how well you can actually track starting outside and going inside. And so this is another similar scenario or a different possibility for this particular trial. So the setup for this one is flexible. And this is also really where the video comes into play, because we want to be able to see the setup of the path you're walking of the building, so that when we look at your data, we're actually able to understand kind of contextually the setup of your buildings. And this is our last test scenario or trial here. And the purpose of this trial is to be our z-axis tracking. So we are asking you to start at the origin at the base of a set of stairs, walk up a set of stairs and stop 10 seconds about halfway through, or if there's a landing, then complete the stairs. And the trick here is we want to see you standing directly above the origin on an elevation change of greater than or equal to 5 meters. So that way on your data, we can see if, as close as possible, if your X and Y are the same and just your Z-axis is different. So we ask that you do that 3 times. And then also between laps, we ask that you do, I think, 10 jumping jacks. This is just to kind of simulate what first responders might be doing, a lot of physical activity while they're actually going through structures. So that's just to simulate some of that physical activity in between climbing up and down these stairs. So this is a much more difficult trial. It'll definitely test some of our submissions with this, but it is kind of the bare minimum to be able to track the Z-axis in 5 or more meters. And so alongside those trials, we do have a request for your videos. So for each scenario, we ask that you do 3 laps, but only ask that you record lap 1. So that way this video doesn't have to be very long. We just want to see the context of your video within the actual location and to compare with the data. And we would also like to see alongside that the command center hub. So we would like to see as you're walking through what the command center hub is actually seeing. So we also kind of recommend that you can record, with one phone, the person actually walking through the trial, and with the other phone, record the command center hub. And with some pretty basic video editing, you should be able to kind of synchronize and combine those and submit them for each one lap of each trial.
Hey, Max?
Yes.
Just for clarity, we're not judging the user interface of that commander's hub. We're just wanting to see it.
Great. Thank you, Sunny. Right.
Yeah, sure.
Great. So that was the recommended testing script with the updates and clarifications to the show off or the demonstration requirement for phase 3. And now moving on to the required data format. So this is available on firstchallenge.com/rules. We have updated an updated rules document there, which kind of logs the changes as we upload them, and also a sample CSV file available for download that follows this format, which should be relatively simple for you to convert your output to this. So we do require a CSV file, and we want it to go to meters with 1 centimeter precision, but that doesn't necessarily mean we expect 1 centimeter accuracy. Rather, we are asking that your output goes to, 2 decimal places for meters. Or decimal degrees is also acceptable with 10 to the -7 precision, which is about 1 centimeter precision. We are asking for a quarter-second timescale. Either 1 or 2 hundredths of a second on either side is okay, and also interpolation is okay. So if you can't currently poll to a quarter-second timescale, we ask that you interpolate to that sort of time frame. And next to the actual CSV format itself. So in the header, we ask for your team name, date, whether or not you're using interpolation, which I believe is just a 1 or a 0. Ground truth, whether or not a ground truth system is used, 0 if not. Units, either M for meters or DD for decimal degrees, and finally latitude. So if you are using decimal degrees, there's some sort of distortion as you go up or down in latitude. So we ask that you share the latitude to which you conducted these tests so that we're able to kind of convert those and compare accurately. And that only has to be rounded to a degree. So very, very broad, doesn't have to be super specific. Next, in the body of that CSV format, we ask for time. So the time each sample was taken as hours, minutes, seconds, and then 2 decimal places to be the quarters of a second. The X and Y, both relative to the origin, which is the start of the test scenario, or possibly the start of the test scenario. So it might be another, and that would be something to share in your README file. The X can point in any direction, but it must be defined again in that README file. And then X and then Y and Z are similar. And then also, if you are using a ground truth system, we do ask these requirements here: position in X for a ground truth system relative to the same origin as above. And if you're not using a ground truth system, just duplicate the X-X0, which is that first X position. And then again, same with Y and Z. And if you're using digital degree units, map latitude and longitude onto X and Y respectively. And here is a sample file. This is very similar to the one we have available for download in CSV format on firstchallenge.com/rules. And this should do a This should make it clear exactly what we're looking for. Next, the README file. So for the video, please indicate if the video was collected using a mobile or stationary camera, and also just some information about the length and file size. For the data file, describe the content and the data file header. If an interpolation is used, indicate the data acquisition rate with instructions on how to discriminate between raw data and interpolated data. For example, if 1 second to the -1 data sampling is used, state that all data samples ending in 00 are raw data, for example. Include a description of the frame of reference, such as whether the frame of reference is aligned with global coordinates or a building's frame of reference. If using DD units, confirm that you are using latitude, longitude, and elevation. Great, and that is our presentation there. Are there any questions, or Sunny, Jason, do we have any comments to build on that?
This is David. I have one question about the expectation where you said the measurements could be made by the field device and then, acquired and then brought back, and then a file be sent to you. In other words, it didn't seem like it had to be online if it was being recorded in the field device. Is there a second requirement that it needs to be communicated to the command center every so many seconds?
Yes, we have a requirement of polling less than 1 second data acquisition rate and less than 10 seconds refresh rate. So by that I meant it can't be something that is loaded onto an SD card from the device on the actual first responder and then loaded into the command center. It has to be wirelessly polling or wired, but it has to be an instantaneous transition at those rates, if that makes sense.
Yes, except polling at 1 second and then you're transmitting then a file of 10 readings, right, back to the command center.
I believe so. Jason, is that what you had in mind?
I think the idea there is that we didn't want any post-processing. If you send a batch file, if you're taking data of each movement, do you want to send each movement, or are you sending essentially like, footsteps or some distance at a time? So if you store some data, for example, and then do some filtering, buffering, analysis on board of your system, that has to be updated. You can update that as a batch file if you'd like.
Okay.
Like essentially, if I had an accelerometer, for example, that had a 30 whatever kilohertz sampling rate, there's a whole lot of nonsense in there just by how fast the system is that really doesn't add a lot of value here. But to put some parameters on it of how often do we want to see data.
Okay. And then the measurements, they seem like they can be in XY coordinates relative to the floor plan, the way it's drawn, or in latitude, longitude, based on the floor plan being rotated to be geo-registered. Is it right that you can turn in the data in either format?
It is, depending on your scenario. So the XY, we're essentially asking if you do some directional vectoring, for example, where Max has a file or this example route, and you start at what we would call 0 or relative 0, that's got to have a longitude and latitude on it somewhere. However you get it, we really don't care.
Okay.
So we're going to call that for some people 0. And if you walk, 7.5 meters at 180 degrees, or is that, 0 degrees, however you turn it in, if you're sending us essentially Cartesian coordinate pairs, those should be in our opinion, translated to some degree of longitude and latitude with this,
That's
you
what I
know,
was,
degree of precision.
yeah, that's what I was
So we
asking.
know some people, yeah, there's such a variety of systems and entries. There are, you know, some people using a variety of networks, a variety of devices, everything from vision to sensing to RSSI and signal propagation, IMUs. So that for us became some form of a common playing field. If you're measuring distance, or if you're, you know, essentially there's a couple of teams comparing the location of the person relative to the boundary box, if you will. There's a variety of methods. So just trying to get a common playing field. And the idea here is that we have a system design with some of the research assistants on the team that might take these relatively large data files and put them through a very common evaluation tool set so that we can really remove and eliminate any perceived biases with manual review of this data. So that's the big goal here is we don't want, you know, 10 judges having 10 unique comfort levels, looking at 30 plus data files, and then trying to compare those outputs versus more of an automated or consistent system by which we evaluate the data sets, if that makes sense.
Okay, fine. One other comment I'd make is that the quarter second, it is sort of non-standard. Usually there's like tenths of seconds or maybe even halves, but that's a detail.
Thank you, David, for your questions.
Sure.
I think at this point, the webinar portion of this I guess meeting is concluded, so we can go ahead and open it up for our technical office hours. Jason, of course, is here to answer any questions either about the presentation or about the challenge in general. So thank you all for your time and for tuning in.
Thank you, Max.
I had a question, if that's possible.
Sure. I'm simply, I'm going to just move from the meeting room I'm in and take this off of an AirPlay and move to my office with a fresh water. So if you could give me like 1 minute, I will be to start working on that.
Okay.
All right. Thank you. And sorry for that.
No problem. So my question is kind of simple regarding that second video that's supposed to be 5 minutes in length. I guess my first question is that a hard stop at 5 minutes? You know, not to be dramatic, but, you know, I don't plan to make it double that, 10 or 15, but is it a hard stop at 5?
Sure. In all reality, Robert, and then for everyone else as well, the 5 minutes is kind of just a suggested recommended guideline. We certainly don't want to take 15-minute videos or more, simply for the sake of how many submittals we're going to review. But we also, you know, want to have a good quantity of content to evaluate you fairly. And
Okay.
sometimes we don't feel like a 1 to 2 minute summary really gets
Mhm.
to the detail of what we're looking for. So if you send in a video that's, 5 minutes and 10 seconds, you're not going to lose points.
Yeah.
If you send in a video that's 3 minutes and 10 seconds, you may or may not pass the filter to the
Yeah.
sequential judging rounds.
Okay. Well, so I did 5 scenarios, and a couple maybe longer than a minute. So I'm not sure how long that would be, but would you, I do some, walking, like I'm doing a left or a right hand search pattern as a firefighter would in an interior structure. Would it be okay to speed up the video in between the walking and then go back to real time, if you will, while making those 10 second stops?
Sure.
I mean,
I think that's fine and fair.
okay,
The reality of the video is we want to have a visual representation in lieu of some uniform ground truth system. So we simply just want to see, what it is you're doing and how you're evaluating the system. And there should be some collaboration between the video, the visual evidence, and the data file.
okay,
And, ultimately clear line of sight that's 2 meters away, and then somebody just happens to put a 1 in front of the 2 to make it 12 meters, we'll know very quick, right? If we have a lot of massage data files, is the idea there. And then
okay.
that's
And then,
essentially the 3 laps or 3 trials as well. We're looking for a lot of repeatability. Having built some of these systems in the past, if you send in a data set that your X and Y is the same in the 7 decimal places 3 times, we'll probably, I don't see that. That's not the way technology works, right? Like there's going to be some drift.
I understand.
Drifting, circular air radius of 3 meters, or a half a foot here and there, I think would be probably very, very realistic, if not challenging at this stage of development.
Okay. And the gentleman did say that, we shouldn't feel married to the example scenarios that he referenced, but I had access to 3 different firefighting training houses, and could not find one that would allow me to be under the stairs directly 90 from a point. But I did go upstairs on a flight. Is that something that you're highly expecting, and I simply need to find a way to get directly underneath a set of stairs?
So there's a couple of thoughts with that example. And more specifically, our idea was that how repeatable or how close are your X and Y coordinates on floor 1 versus floor 2. The only thing that should really change, plus minus, then would be the Z. So, that is, it's kind of one of those things, Robert, if we don't give you an example, then we have, I think what we've presented should be considered the vanilla. And certainly we wouldn't want to put anybody in danger. We don't want you to, risk injury nor break any rules. And those are just kind of here would be something that we think demonstrates with a high degree of, there's a challenge to what we're asking you to do, but I think some people will do more difficult scenarios. I mean, that was the intent of it, right? From a judging perspective. Okay.
Thank you, sir. You've answered my questions. I appreciate you. Thank you.
Yep. Have a good afternoon.
This is Sunny. One thing I would add in there is you want to put yourself in the mind of a judge who's got to make a decision about the quality of your prototype. So whenever, if you're deviating from sort of what we're recommending, you just want to make sure it's clear to them that we're getting the performance, or you're proving out the kind of things we're looking for. And just like Jason was saying, if you can't get directly above, the judges still see evidence that the system would operate that way if you were able to get directly above. So however you can best convey that information, and you might verbally say that in your video that we weren't able to do that, or in your file or a README file or something like that. So you just want the judges to know that you're trying to give a fair representation of how your system really performs.
Thank you. I appreciate that.
When I write any proposal or anything or submit any competition, I'm always trying to think, how's the judge going to look at what I'm presenting? Because in the end, they're going to make the decision those 10 folks there, and they're going to realize there's reality of what you could do on the ground and what you can't.
I agree. Thank you, sir.
There we go. Two quick questions. First is, are we only looking to track a single unit for right now? If we have multiple units that are being tracked during any of these trials, do you want us to filter it out by unit and just dial in on one specific unit? And second question was going off of the trial 3. Is there a preference given to commercial structures versus residential? It looked like residential was implied in those, so I didn't know if that's, you know, based on those recommendations, if there was a preference there.
Sure, those are the great questions, Tim. So let me go back. So if you have a system that's already able to be deployed in terms of a squad, I'll just say, or more than one unit, if you want to show that data, that's fine. We're really going to be looking at a singular unit at this time. You know, as we move to phases 4 and 5, I think we'll be looking for multiple nodes in a network that would be visualized at a similar time in a similar platform. If you send data from one unit right now, that's fine. I don't know how much we will actually evaluate multiple nodes, unless in some cases, I would say there are teams that have system who from a mesh networking have some dependency on having multiple nodes versus a kind of home run, one node to the base philosophy. So you do what makes sense for you technically. We're going to evaluate essentially one data set if that's possible. I think the second part to your question was in scenario 3, where we show some interior structure and walls. Do we have some recommendation or preference on commercial versus residential? That's a great question. I would personally, at this point, we don't specify, and we have no prescription in phase 3. Should you choose concrete, commercial, residential? In general, there's some statistics that would suggest the most common deployment for first responders is outdoors, second being indoor residential, and then and so forth. Commercial structures are maybe not accessible to some teams, so we'll let you pick.
Well, if I can just inject something from a first responder point of view, I think there'll be much less use of technology trying to determine indoor location in residential compared to commercial, because the problem of losing somebody or directing difficult routes and so forth are in the larger structures. So I think, in my opinion, this research would be most relevant if it's applied to a reasonable, at least a moderate sized building, where you go have stairs and different rooms and conference rooms and so forth that you might go in and out of. That's just my opinion in terms of the usability of the outcome of these tests.
Yeah, and to kind of build on what David was saying there, I think it's along those lines. You know, what Jason and Max have been talking about and presenting, you know, sort of the baseline of what we're looking for. But if I think about this from a judge's point of view, they're going to be looking for, at this stage, we have to eliminate folks because we can only house so many competitors at the Skytech Urban Training Center for phase 4. So they're going to be looking for differentiators between the teams. So when you're doing your write-up and you're presenting yourself, not just the videos and the trials, but the whole package, as a competitor, you want to think, how do I demonstrate that I have the best-in-class system? I'm tackling tough problems. I'm able to do certain features and functions that we might not require you to talk about, but definitely show the quality of your package and the possibility of where you could be by the end of phase 5. And so you do want to think about that from a competitiveness point of view as, you know, here's the baseline, but what else can I do? What information can I share that's going to help the judges decide my product, my prototype is the best one to move forward?
Fantastic. Thank you all for the answers, and we're looking forward to submitting what we have here in a few weeks.
And I'll just say, Tim, irrespective of the structure of the type of structure you pick from a classification point of view, really the idea there in phase 3, by providing some of those example scenarios, open, straight line of sight from one end of the hall to the other is probably not going to get it done, versus showing some of that interior wall structure, furniture, etc. is something that's going to have to be demonstrated in this round. Versus phase 2, there were some, plus minus 3 meter from one side of the room to the other submittals, and that frankly is probably not going to get it done in phase 3 here. To Sonny's point, we're going from 30 plus teams down to 10 for phase 4.
Oh, hi, Fabio. Before you speak, I wanted to make one more comment with regard to whether you're reporting a single sender or a team, and the acquisition of that data at the command center and display of it is very different between a single sender and a team. And I don't think there are any plans right now for phase 4 or phase 5 for the judging platform to be able to accept a team at a time. I think each competitor solution is going to be put with a first responder who's going to go out and go through a scenario. But I don't think that we plan at this time to deploy more than one at once in phases 4 and 5. Correct me if I'm wrong, Jason.
I think we'll send out some of those details the closer we get to phase 4, and it'll be very, reflective, the expectation of the prize money, and what we would suggest teams could build or demonstrate.
Yeah, and I would jump in, Jason, and say that I actually don't know that that's true. We're working on those discussions now. Really, our focus is on phase 3. And the other thing to keep in mind is between phases 4 and 5, there will be significantly increasing complexity in what we're judging at phase 5 for the final awards. And so those decisions have not been made. And just I don't want people to walk away thinking that we've made those decisions. We have not made those decisions. We've had various discussions about it, but we're basically trying to get through phase 3 now, see who the teams are that come out the other end, and then how that might impact or not impact the testing design that we do.
Well, I certainly didn't mean to be negative, and I welcome the attempt to display teams at phase 4 and 5. So look forward to that.
I have a question. So it sounds like most scenarios that are being suggested for the testing, they don't require a knowledge of the indoor situation awareness. So my question is, we're obviously we're tackling the problem, as you guys know, from a perspective of completely lack of knowledge of what is actually going on in the indoor space. But if there is an identification of, for example, the presence of a victim in the indoor space, then you would be able to deploy a tracking device that would allow the first responder to reach that target. So, prior to that, it sounds like that information would be available. Is it still of value to the first challenge to actually obtain that information ahead of time and provide that initial coordinate or the target coordinate that now the tracking solution would have to pursue in order to reach that point? Or at this point, it would be basically one of these submissions that will definitely not make through phase 3, but will be one of those, whatever, best in class or, a separate track that will be followed, but not necessarily part of the main track. That makes sense.
Yeah, no, so to unpack that a little bit, and you correct me if I'm wrong, I believe there's a lot of value in the solution that you're presenting, but given the very specific outcome that we're looking for the core first challenge, I think what you're describing would be very good as an alternative competition submittal, versus what we believe the core mission is to uniquely track and provide localization of the first responder entering a building and making that visible to an external person who is monitoring their location. And there are going to be a variety of methods over time with which people are either drawing, creating, estimating floor plans on their own, on the fly, literally in real time. There are some people somehow getting floor plans from computer vision mapping programs. There's a variety of ways. We may or may not give you a set of floor plans for phases 4 and 5. If we do, it may not be a complete set of floor plans. It may be partials. So the core function of the competition isn't necessarily to create the best floor plan mapping technology as much as it is to track and localize the first responder into a system that may look like the mapping and visualization tool. Some teams are mature enough to develop the mapping and visualization tools, but that's not necessarily the core outcome of the competition as much as it is tracking the person within the boundary and transmitting their geospatial geolocation data.
Gotcha. I just want to clarify it. It wouldn't be more as much of a mapping as it would be the detection of human presence within the indoor space without prior knowledge of their initial coordinates, and then use that information to deploy the first responders with their tracking gear, which sounds like it's like what the main goal of the competition. And as a clarifying question, I'm going to ask, you said phase 4, there could be a map already provided, but that precludes a phase 3 approval, which is exclusive to phase 4. So I just want to make sure that it would, solutions that actually do sense behavior and presence of life through obstructions prior to deployment, if they are still welcome in the competition. That's where I want to get clarification. You guys got that? Or
so I can only necessarily repeat. I'm certain, without mentioning the team name or the technology, I'm really, I think a lot of us are very infatuated and very much respectful of the technical capability and the support of your technology to the first responder. Absolutely the right technology, maybe not exactly the right competition, but certainly it's a strong supporting technology to who our mutual customer is.
Gotcha. Thank you. Oh, and I have another question, a follow-up. Obviously, that creates a new set of challenges that can be resolved with a combination of teams within the competition. If nothing else, as you mentioned, to augment the capability, that is the scope of the challenge. So my question then is, when it comes to team formation, will the rules for team formation be, teams of teams, if you will be the same as those who were defined for just like a single team? And I'll give you an example. 2 teams that have already been formed for the competition, they now try to collude in order to address the situation as a new entity. Can they go? Do they have to go as a new entity, that it's now the combination of the 2 teams, or can there be a distinction or a differentiation within within the teams? Or is that something we have to work ourselves among ourselves to just have one representative moving forward?
I can answer this one, Jason.
Yeah, thank you. I think there's some.
Yeah. So from the competition point of view, the team that gets selected to move forward is the team invited to phase 4. If that team wants to team up with other people who were also invited to phase 4, teams that weren't invited to phase 4, folks who haven't been part of the competition up to that point, that is that team's decision and responsibility. We don't have to have anything to do with those negotiations or discussions. We just will have an invitation. You're a winner of phase 3 and you're invited to phase 4. Show up with whatever team makes sense for you at that point in time. This is an evolving technology, evolving teaming relationships, etc. So we would love it if teams ended up merging together and forming a stronger single team than weaker separate teams, or teams that are eliminated join in with a team that moves forward and creates a stronger prototype. In the end, the win for this competition is not running a great competition. The win for this is these products making it to market and saving lives. And so our eye is on that prize. What's going to be the best product to market for solving this indoor tracking problem? And that likely is to be a combination of technologies and teams and expertise solving that problem over time, now, during the competition, after the competition. So we strongly encourage people to work together, and we don't have to have anything, even any knowledge of that working together until you show up for the competition itself, like in phase 4.
Thanks, Sonny.
So there would be no like approval process or anything like that. The team lead, remember each team in the rules, you designate an official representative of the team. So that official representative is the person that we look to be the representative of whoever is represented by that team over time. So they're like, they're the legal authority of who will win. Like when you win phase 3, that representative is responsible to distribute those funds to whoever they say is on their team, and the contractual relationships that they've developed, with various partners.
Yep, makes sense. Thank you.
We had a specific inquiry come in through the chat. So specifically, Charlie, Nav, for you, the webinar will be posted, if I'm correct, on the R2 portal. Max?
Yes.
So it's a link that it's emailed, or how we notify people to locate the material, but
Yep. So we'll have this recording posted on the R2 portal, probably through announcements. So you can easily find it. We'll also post it on the Challenge YouTube channel, and also make sure that it's distributed through the newsletter. It goes out weekly. And then also kind of an important note is next week we are moving office hours to the R2 Connect portal. That separate, or the newest technology from R2. It's a really great new, very snappy portal, and there's a video conferencing side of it that's very useful. So it is. Let me grab the link and I can share it in the chat, or it's in the newsletters that have been shared recently. Yep, 1 second.
And technically, R2 Connect is a separate system than the R2 portal or the first portal. So you can use the same login information, but you'll need to recreate an account on the R2 Connect system to be able to log into that system. So we're going to be using that moving forward, probably for all of our office hours and webinars. We're going to do some simple usage for office hours initially, make sure everything's working okay, and then move over to doing our webinars, etc., through that system.
Yep, thank you, Sunny. So that's connect.r2network.com. So you'll need to make an account, but it should be very easy to find the rooms tab, and then next week there will be a first challenge office hours room that you can join. And we can conduct them just how we have been.
Max, could you put the link in the chat for the FRST YouTube channel?
Sure. One
Okay.
moment. Okay, I just shared it. So all of our past webinars should be on there, and also a lot of the team community videos are being released weekly.
Thanks.
Yeah, so just in case we have a hard stop or Zoom stops around 2, if anyone has any questions, etc., that you were just waiting to ask, now would be a good time to ask, or connect with us through the portal after the fact.
Max, there was a question there about the slides from today. Will the slides be uploaded with the video?
Yeah, I think we can put those in the R2 portal, and if not, I can distribute them via email if need be.
Yeah, probably in the newsletter, wherever you put the video, probably put a link to the slides themselves.
Yep, great thinking.
All right, thanks everyone. In the meantime, if there are any unique inquiries, feel free to go through the portal. You can direct message us through that. Some people have emails, whatnot. Otherwise, enjoy the long holiday weekend. Dave, I'll see you tomorrow, and then Sunny and Max, I think I'll see you Friday-ish. So we'll check in soon.
Good.
Thank you, everybody.
Yeah,
Thank
thanks,
you.
everybody.
Thanks a lot. Good afternoon. Bye-bye.